Hi everyone. Of course, as luck will have it, we have to have our snow days right here on the part of the semester that I consider to be the most interesting, and that is analyzing the way the authors build character in these pieces of short fiction. In order to make sense of what the author's doing, we're using either deductive or inductive thinking, and most of the time both of those at the same time, but I thought we might consider the way the author is creating character as eliciting one of those types of thinking more heavily. So if the author is telling us directly what to think about a character, then all we're required to do is deductive thinking. We have the generalization, and then we just look for the evidence that supports that claim about the character. More interesting, though, is when the author requires us to use inductive reasoning to understand character when we are shown behavior, actions, speeches, thoughts, and then we have to put those things together and interpret and draw our own conclusions. So what's interesting about John Updike's A and P is that we have to rely entirely on inductive thinking because our protagonist and main character is the narrator of the piece. So there will be no slots where there is just direct characterization. So if we start looking at the opening paragraph, this inductive thinking is time consuming and exhausting, but also rewarding as we start attempting to pay attention to details and ask ourselves, well, what do we make of that beyond just, oh, it is what it is. So in the first two sentences, we can see the narrator introducing himself in a way. As he says, in walks these three girls in nothing but bathing suits. I'm in the third checkout slot with my back to the door. I don't see them till they're over by the bread. So we learned that the narrator is a part of the establishment. And we don't know yet why these three girls are coming in their bikinis, but we do know that the narrator has a job at the establishment, and he's one of several. I'm in the third checkout, so nothing particularly remarkable or distinguished about his service to the institution, but he is part of the establishment, and as we learn later, reluctantly so. So we also learned some things when he tells us what he noticed first. The one that caught my eye first was the one in the plaid green two-piece. She was a chunky kid, so there's a sense of, I guess, superiority in some way. Good tan, sweet-browed, soft-looking can with those two crescents of white just under it where the sun never seems to hit at the top of the back of her legs. So, and Updike has taken a lot of criticism for this, that the 19-year-old checker notices the physical appearance, and particularly the can and the place where there are the sun hasn't hit. Well, okay, so yes, that tells us that he initially sees these young girls as just physical objects, and we also learned that he's using some colloquial language, calling her buttocks a can, and we're going to get some more colloquial language in just a little bit to let us see this young man as very average, ordinary, late adolescent kid who is, or young man. I just noticed that kid is a little condescending, I guess. So then the next part. I stood there with my hand on a box of hi-ho crackers trying to remember if I rang it up or not. which of course he could have checked, right? But I ring it up again and the customer starts giving me hell. So more colloquial language, but now we're ready for something that I've observed, and I just kind of notice over time, and that is, so here we have this first part where the one of the frequent customers, she's one of these cash register watchers, a witch about 50, with rouge on her cheekbones and no eyebrows. Well, that's a condescending description, and we learn pretty quickly that the narrator seems to have some condescension for all of the shoppers who are coming into the establishment. Later, he calls them sheep several times, and so he doesn't have a sense of connection or a sense that the identity of these shoppers is anything that's relevant to him. There's also something here where he takes this idea of her watching him ringing up the stuff as some kind of personal victory if he makes a mistake. Seems like a little paranoia maybe that, you possibly have shopped and have watched to make sure your register tape is accurate, but you probably have not taken glee if you've had to correct the cashier. But in this narrator's mind, it's like a battle wherein he's rebelling against the sheep, and he feels like the sheep are out to get him or out to look for mistakes that he's making. Oh, and anyway, so he goes on with this thought of her being a witch. If she'd been born at the right time, they would burn her over in Salem. Again, more condescension toward the customer. And then his attention is focused back on the girls who seem to be walking up and down the aisles and drawing attention to themselves, and the nerve that they have with coming into the store in their bathing suits. So of course we have to think about the time period. We're told this is 1962, and there's certain guidelines of propriety that people violate nowadays that folks wouldn't have dreamed of back in the 60s. If you go to Walmart today, you'll see people wearing anything and everything, and seeing someone in a bathing suit wouldn't be particularly shocking. But it just wasn't done. No shirt, no shoes, no service. Very important social codes about public propriety during the time. And then you'll notice in the next little bit of the short story, after he lets us know they didn't even have shoes on, he goes down through noticing physical characteristics of each of the girls, and makes commentary on the kind of girls he thinks each is, and then narrows his focus on the one he believes to be the queen, the one that has commanded most of his attention, and he seems to be just enamored with the physical presence of this gal. On the other hand, I also want you to note, while he's describing this girl that he's infatuated with, he plugs in this little comment. You never know for sure how girls' minds work. Do you really think it's a mind there, or just a little buzz like a bee in a glass jar? Which again fits into that kind of judgmental and condescending attitude toward other people. But he definitely illustrates that he has admiration for the queen. When he gets into nitty-gritty of describing the queen, he, of course, concentrates on her bathing suit and the shock that she also has her her straps down on her bathing suit. But there's something else, this little bathing suit with a little nibble all over it, and which suggests this bathing suit was not a brand new suit. Now, of course, his description is concentrating on physical details of her neck, her shoulders, and his final conclusion, it was more than pretty. So I'm going to stop right there and do just a little bit with what we've observed so far. Okay, well, I've jumped forward a few paragraphs, and I'm concentrating on a paragraph in which the narrator has finished physically describing the queen that he finds so captivating and alluring, and he's now back to describing the entire group of girls in their parade up and down the aisles in the A&P. And so the section I'm focusing on right now is this sentence in which there's some additional contempt for the regular shoppers of the A&P. The narrator says, the sheep pushing their carts down the aisle, the girls were walking against the usual traffic. Not that we have one-way signs or anything, were pretty hilarious. You could see them when Queenie's white shoulders dawned on them, kind of jerk or hop or hiccup, but their eyes snapped back to their own baskets and on they pushed. I bet you could have set off dynamite in an A&P and the people would, by and large, keep reaching and checking oatmeal off their list and muttering, let me see, there was a third thing, da-da-da-da-da, and then the last sentence of that paragraph, a few house slaves in pin curls. So, well, all right, so I've made the point that this isn't really a very complimentary depiction of the regular shoppers at the A&P, and then one might ask, why does he have contempt for them? And the conclusion could be that, something so basic as he doesn't like it. He doesn't like being a part of this sameness, of the predictability, of the standard kind of placid social class that is preoccupied with conformity, hence the word sheep, and just going along with expected social norms and without, as far as he can see, any kind of excitement or allure. And so that's in one sense we get of the narrator in A&P, that he's bored to death with this checkout job, and he doesn't see him as part of the social class or the social group that A&P appeals to, which is the establishment, the established social order. And so here's this little section with this reaction between the narrator and Stokesy, who is this older man, 22 years old, and that's also where we learn that our narrator is 19. Okay, well, and then we come to a whammy. Our narrator has told us a paragraph or two earlier that says, now here comes the funny part, and we don't quite know what that means, but our attention's kind of perked up. What's so funny? And then his parents think it's the sad part, and he says, I don't think it was so sad. But when Queenie gets up to the cash register and she's been scolded by the manager of the store and told this isn't the beach, she puts down her pickled herrings. And so in this paragraph is a played out class conflict when the narrator realizes, if indeed her mother has told her to come in and pick up this jar of herring snacks, that she is of a different social class altogether from him and maybe like out of his league. So she states this: my mother asked me to come and pick up a jar of herring snacks, and he's startled by that. And then he begins imagining her in the social class from which she must be if she's buying herring snacks as opposed to something else. All of a sudden, I slid right down her voice into her living room, and then goes into description of a little more sophisticated social class, and contrasts that with his own house. When my parents have somebody over, they get lemonade, and if it's a real racy affair, Schlitz in tall glasses with "they'll do it every time" cartoons stenciled on them. Well, of course, Schlitz, you may or may not know, was a popular beer in the 50s, 60s, and even 70s, but this "they'll do it every time" is a cartoon strip, and let me show you a typical one of those cartoons here in the next slide. Okay, so here you go. Here is a Jimmy Hatlow "They'll Do It Every Time" cartoon, and these cartoons were so popular from like the early 30s up until Hatlow's death in the early 60s. And even after he died, other artists continued this "they'll do it every time" sequence. But not uncommon whatsoever was a voluptuous woman and a man doing something ridiculous and sometimes even disastrous in preoccupation, staring at the voluptuous woman instead of handling his business. Okay, so think about that in relation to this short story. Okay, so I'm jumping over here to the end of the story where Sammy is getting ready to quit, and it's only this scene where we learn that he has an actual name. But, all right, so he's watching them, and the girls are in a hurry to get out, so I say I quit to lingo quick enough for them to hear. Quick enough for them to hear. So he is making some kind of stand in order to be their hero. So we understand something about his motivation right there, but they don't notice him. And his general attitude toward other people haven't changed much. Look at, he refers to them as Queenie and Plaid and Big Tall Goonie, which again is not at all complimentary in relation to describing these women for whom these girls for whom he has just quit his job. Still contemptuous. But anyway, so we have this interaction with Sammy and the manager, and the manager is pretty sensitive to Sammy. He doesn't get too harsh or cross or pick up a fight or whatever. He just says, I don't think you understand what you've been saying, and you don't want to do this to your mom and dad. But Sammy's convinced that he's going to quit, and Lingle says this line, "You'll feel this for the rest of your life." And now Sammy's trying to reflect on why did he do what he's done. He didn't like the girl being embarrassed, so we've got that. And he's ready to make a run for it, but he gets out into the parking lot, and they're gone. So if he thought he would hook up with these girls, that expectation has been thwarted. And we're left kind of trying to sort out what's the complexity of Sammy's motivation. Is it, as some critics say, he's a kind of archetypal hero, and he's looking for damsel in distress, and he's defending the honor of these young women. That's one possibility. Other people observe the possibility that he's dissatisfied with the social structure and social class from the very beginning, and he's looking for a reason to rebel. And the entry in of these young women have given him this chance to rebel uh, against social order, or the established social order, I should say. And then I kind of want to dwell on this. My stomach kind of fell as I felt how hard the world was going to be to me hereafter. Or you remember they'll do it every time cartoon, where I told you the male, so frequently in those cartoons a male's doing something pretty dangerous, or something pretty dangerous happens to the man because he's preoccupied with staring at the scantily clad young woman. Um, the one layer of possible humor here is that the short story plays out one of those cartoon sequences where he quits his job and kind of knocks himself in the head with a pole, and the girl just goes on without noticing the big sacrifice he's just made.